My name is Noah Mitchell. I'm 38 years old, and until 6 months ago, I was a normal guy with a normal life. I worked as a wildlife photographer for National Geographic, spending most of my time in remote locations documenting animal behavior. I've always prided myself on being level-headed, practical, and skeptical. I didn't believe in monsters or supernatural creatures. That changed during what was supposed to be a routine assignment in the Rocky Mountains. I'm writing this account because I need people to understand what's out there. What I encountered wasn't a bear, wasn't a wolf, and wasn't anything science has properly documented. I've spent months in therapy trying to process what happened, and my therapist suggested writing it all down might help. So here it is, the complete, unfiltered truth about my encounter in the Rockies. It was late September of last year. I'd been commissioned to photograph the changing fall colors and wildlife preparing for winter in a remote section of the Colorado Rockies. The location was perfect, about 15 miles from the nearest town, accessible only by a logging road that hadn't been maintained in years. I'd brought enough supplies for 2 weeks, my camera gear, and a satellite phone for emergencies. The first 3 days were uneventful. I captured some breathtaking shots of elk, set up camera traps for nocturnal animals, and enjoyed the solitude. The aspens were turning a brilliant gold, and the mountains were bathed in that perfect autumn light photographers dream about. I'd set up my base camp in a small clearing near a stream, with dense forest on 3 sides and a rocky cliff face about half a mile to the west. The trouble began on the 4th night. I was reviewing the day's photos in my tent when I heard something moving outside. That wasn't unusual. Deer and elk often wandered close to camp. But this movement sounded different, more deliberate. The footsteps were heavy, and whatever it was seemed to be circling my tent. I grabbed my flashlight and unzipped the tent just enough to peek out. The forest was dark, with only a sliver of moonlight filtering through the trees. My light caught nothing but shadows between the pines. Then the footsteps stopped. I waited, listening intently, but heard only the wind and the distant hooting of an owl. Convincing myself it was probably just a curious deer, I zipped the tent back up and tried to sleep. That was when I heard it, a sound I still hear in my nightmares. It wasn't a howl, not exactly. It was deeper, more guttural, like a growl that rose into something between a roar and a wail. No wolf makes that sound, no bear either. I've worked around predators all my life. I know what wolves sound like. I know what mountain lions and bears sound like. This was different. It made the hair on my arms stand up and sent a primal surge of fear through my body. That night I didn't sleep. I kept my hunting knife close and listened as the thing, whatever it was, moved around the perimeter of my camp. It never came closer, but it never truly left either. By morning I was exhausted and on edge, but daylight brought relief. I searched the area around my camp and found tracks. But they confused me more than they clarified anything. They looked canine, but impossibly large, at least twice the size of a timber wolf's print. And there was something wrong about the shape, too. The front tracks showed elongated digits, almost like fingers rather than paws. I took photos, measured them, and tried to convince myself they were just distorted bear prints. But deep down, I knew better. I should have left then. In retrospect, that's obvious, but I had a job to do, and I'd encountered aggressive wildlife before. I decided to move my camp to a more exposed area, away from the dense forest, thinking it would give me better visibility if the animal returned. The next 2 days passed without incident. I almost convinced myself I'd overreacted, that the strange tracks and sounds had explanations that fit within my understanding of nature. I captured some of the best photography of my career during those days. A bull elk silhouetted against the sunrise, a fox kit playing with fallen leaves. I began to relax. On the 7th day, I hiked further than usual, following a game trail that led toward the base of the cliff face I'd noticed earlier. The trail opened into a small meadow, and as I crossed it, I noticed something odd. The birds had gone silent. In the wilderness, sudden silence is a warning. I stopped, scanning the tree line, and that's when I saw it, just for a moment, partially hidden behind a large pine about 50 yards away. It was tall, standing upright on what appeared to be hind legs. Its body was covered in dark fur, and its head seemed disproportionately large. When it moved slightly, I caught a glimpse of what looked like a muzzle. Then it stepped back and disappeared into the deeper forest. My first thought was that I'd seen a bear standing on its hind legs. Bears do that sometimes to get a better view or scent. But the proportions were all wrong. This thing's legs were too long, its shoulders too narrow. And the way it moved, there was something almost human in its deliberate stealth. I raised my camera instinctively, but it was gone before I could capture anything. I didn't pursue it. Instead, I backed away slowly, keeping my eyes on the spot where it had disappeared, and returned to camp as quickly as I could. That night, it returned, not just circling this time, but watching from the edge of the clearing. In the moonlight, I could make out its silhouette. It stood there for hours, unmoving, just watching. I kept my fire burning high and bright, clutching my knife and the bear spray I'd brought along. Near dawn, it finally left. I packed up immediately, planning to hike out and return to civilization. I'd gotten enough photos for the assignment. There was no reason to stay. But as I headed back toward the logging road where I'd parked my truck, I realized I was being followed. It kept its distance, staying just out of clear sight, moving parallel to my path through the trees. Occasionally, I'd catch glimpses, a shadow moving between trees, the flash of eyes reflecting light. It was hurting me, I realized with growing horror, steering me away from the path back to my vehicle. By midday, I knew I was lost. The trail I'd been following had gradually curved away from the direction I needed to go, and now I found myself in unfamiliar terrain. The forest was thicker here, the undergrowth more dense. The thing continued to shadow me, always just at the edge of visibility. As the sun began to set, desperation set in. I needed shelter for the night, and I needed to regain my bearings. I found a small outcropping of rock that formed a shallow cave-like space. It wasn't ideal, but it would protect my back and allow me to keep watch in one direction. I gathered wood for a fire and settled in for another sleepless night. That was when I first saw it clearly. As darkness fell, it emerged from the trees about 30 yards from my position. In the dying light, I could finally see what had been stalking me. It stood at least 7 feet tall, its body a disturbing hybrid of wolf and human. Its legs were long and powerful, ending in what could only be described as paws, but with elongated digits that curved into claws. Its torso was lean and muscular, covered in dark gray fur that became thicker around its shoulders and neck. Its arms were too long for its body, hanging down with hands that were neither human nor animal, somewhere horribly in between. But it was the face that haunts me most. A wolf's muzzle, filled with teeth too large and numerous to be natural, set below eyes that were unnervingly intelligent. They weren't the eyes of an animal. There was something in them, something that understood exactly what it was doing. It didn't rush me. It just stood there watching, its chest heaving with each breath. I had my knife in one hand, bear spray in the other, and the fire between us. For what felt like hours, we remained in this standoff. Then it did something I still can't explain. It smiled. Not in any human way, but its lips pulled back further, exposing more of those terrible teeth in what could only be described as a grim parody of a smile. Then it turned and melted back into the darkness. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I fed the fire and waited for dawn, jumping at every sound from the surrounding forest. When morning finally came, I was exhausted but alive. I checked my satellite phone hoping to call for rescue, only to find it damaged. Whether from my hike or by deliberate action, I couldn't tell. Using the sun for navigation, I set off in what I hoped was the direction of the logging road. I had to get back to my truck. It was my only chance of escape. I'd been hiking for maybe 2 hours when I found the body. It was a hiker, or had been. Male, probably in his 20s, wearing expensive outdoor gear. He was sprawled in a small clearing, and what had been done to him? I've seen animal attacks before. This was different. He'd been torn apart, but with a precision that was disturbing. Certain parts had been removed, consumed. Other parts had been arranged in a way that no animal would do. I should have documented it, should have taken photos as evidence. But in that moment, all I could think about was getting away. The kill was fresh, no more than a few hours old. That meant the creature was nearby. I took the dead man's compass and map from his pack checked his location, and realized I was further from the road than I'd thought. The creature had been leading me deeper into its territory. Using the map, I plotted a new course and moved as quickly and quietly as I could. The forest seemed to close in around me, branches reaching like fingers, roots threatening to trip me with every step. I felt eyes on me constantly, but saw nothing when I turned to look. By late afternoon, I reached a ridge that overlooked a valley I recognized from my initial hike-in. The logging road was visible in the distance, cutting through the trees like a pale scar. My truck would be parked about 2 miles along it. I felt a surge of hope for the first time in days. That hope was short-lived. As I began to descend the ridge, I heard it behind me, not trying to hide anymore. The heavy footfalls, the cracking of branches. It was coming directly for me now. I ran. Abandoning any pretense of caution, I crashed through the underbrush, half sliding, half falling down the steep slope toward the valley floor. Behind me, I heard it gaining ground with frightening speed. The sounds of its pursuit drove me forward, beyond exhaustion, beyond fear, into some primal state where only survival mattered. I burst out of the tree line onto a rocky stretch of ground that led to a steep drop-off. Not quite a cliff, but a sharply angled slope covered in loose shale and scrub brush. Below, perhaps 100 feet down, was the continuation of the forest. Beyond that, the road, my salvation. But between me and that drop was the creature. It had somehow gotten ahead of me, circling around to cut off my escape. It stood on its hind legs, those terrible, not quite hands flexing at its sides, its breath coming in clouds in the cooling evening air. For the first time, I got a full, clear look at it in daylight. What I had taken for dark gray fur was actually a mottled mix of colors, grays, browns, and blacks that created perfect camouflage in the forest shadows. Its body was a nightmarish blend of anatomies. The powerful hind legs of a wolf, but with joints that bent like a human's. A torso that narrowed at the waist, almost like a man's, but with the powerful chest and shoulders of a predator. Its arms were the worst. Too long, too articulated, ending in those horrible hands with their curved, yellowed claws. And its face. God, its face. The elongated muzzle of a wolf, but wider, with a jaw that hinged open further than should be possible. Eyes set forward like a predator's, but with an intelligence that no animal should possess. They were amber, those eyes, with vertical pupils that fixed on me with unmistakable hunger. It took a step toward me, and I backed away, edging toward the drop-off. I had nowhere else to go. The bear spray was in my hand, but in that moment, it seemed absurdly inadequate. What was I thinking? This wasn't a bear. This was something else entirely. "Stay back!" I shouted, as if this thing could understand me, as if it would respond to human commands. To my shock, it paused. Its head tilted slightly, in a gesture so dog-like it would have been almost comical in any other context. Then it made a sound, a rumbling from deep in its chest that wasn't quite a growl. It was almost like it was considering me. That moment of hesitation was my only chance. I feinted to the left, then darted right, hoping to circle around it toward the forest. It reacted with terrifying speed, cutting off my path with a single bound. We were back where we started, with the drop-off behind me and the monster in front. I had one option left. The slope behind me was dangerous, steep and covered in loose rock. I'd likely be injured in the descent, but staying meant certain death. I'd seen what this thing had done to the hiker. I waited until it took another step toward me. Then I deployed the bear spray directly at its face. It recoiled with a howl of pain and rage, a sound no natural animal could make. In that moment of distraction, I turned and threw myself down the slope. What followed was chaos. I tumbled rather than ran, trying to control my descent, but mostly failing. Rocks cut into my hands and face. My ankle twisted painfully as I slid through scree and dirt. Above me, the creature's howls turned to snarls of fury. I was halfway down when I heard it coming after me. Somehow it was navigating the treacherous slope with more agility than should have been possible. I didn't look back. I couldn't afford to. Every ounce of concentration was focused on reaching the bottom without breaking my neck. I hit the tree line at the bottom of the slope hard, rolling through ferns and over fallen logs. Pain shot through my left arm. Something had broken in the fall, but adrenaline kept me moving, staggering to my feet and pushing deeper into the forest toward where I knew the road must be. The creature was right behind me. I could hear its breathing, the heavy impact of its feet on the forest floor. It was toying with me now. It could have caught me at any time, but it was drawing out the chase, perhaps enjoying my terror. I burst through a final line of trees, and there it was, the logging road. And more incredibly, my truck, parked right where I'd left it, just 100 yards down the road. I'd come out closer to it than I'd dared hope. With the last of my strength, I sprinted for the vehicle. Behind me, the creature let out a roar of frustration and redoubled its pursuit. I could feel it just behind me, so close that I imagined I could feel its breath on my neck. I reached the truck, fumbling with bloody hands for the keys in my pocket. By some miracle, they hadn't been lost in my tumble down the slope. I wrenched the door open and threw myself inside, slamming and locking it just as the creature crashed against the side of the vehicle. The impact rocked the truck on its suspension. Outside my window, not 3 feet away, was the thing's face, contorted in rage, those amber eyes burning with hatred and hunger. It slammed a clawed hand against the glass, leaving smears of saliva and what looked horribly like human blood. My hands shook so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. The creature circled the truck, testing each window, looking for a way in. The glass wouldn't hold for long against those claws. I had seconds, not minutes. The engine roared to life, and I threw the truck into reverse, then drive, peeling away down the logging road with the creature in pursuit. In my rearview mirror, I watched it running after me on all fours now, moving with a speed that defied belief. But even it couldn't match a vehicle at full throttle. Gradually, it fell behind, until I could no longer see it in the gathering darkness. I didn't slow down until I reached the main highway. I drove straight to the nearest hospital, where I was treated for a broken arm, a sprained ankle, multiple lacerations, and severe dehydration. I told the doctors I'd gotten lost and fallen down a slope trying to find my way back to the road. They had no reason to doubt my story. The physical evidence supported it. I didn't mention the creature. I didn't mention the dead hiker. I knew how it would sound. But once I was released from the hospital, I anonymously reported the location of the body to the park rangers. They found him 2 days later. The official report cited a bear attack as the cause of death. It wasn't a bear. I know what I saw. In the months since, I've researched obsessively, looking for similar accounts, trying to understand what I encountered. There are stories, old legends from Native American tribes indigenous to the Rockies, accounts from early settlers, even modern reports dismissed as hoaxes or misidentifications. They speak of creatures that walk like men but hunt like wolves, skinwalkers, werewolves, different names for what might be the same entity. I don't know what to call what I saw. I don't know if it was a previously undocumented predator, some evolutionary offshoot of known species, or something that defies scientific explanation altogether. What I do know is that it was intelligent, it was calculating, and it saw humans as prey. I haven't returned to photography. I haven't set foot in the wilderness since that day. Sometimes on full moon nights, I wake up in a cold sweat, certain I can hear that unnatural howl in the distance. And I wonder if it's still out there, in those remote corners of the Rockies, hunting. If you're planning a trip to the backcountry, especially in Colorado, be careful. Stay in groups, make noise, carry protection. And if you find yourself alone in the forest and the birds suddenly go silent, run. Don't look back. Just run. Because there are things in this world that we don't understand. Things that hunt in the shadows. Things that shouldn't exist, but do. I survived. The hiker didn't. I still don't know why it let me live when it could have caught me a dozen times during that pursuit. Sometimes I think it was just playing with its food and I got lucky. Other times I have a more disturbing thought, that it wanted me to spread this story, that it's intelligent enough to understand fear, to cultivate it. Whatever the truth, I've said my piece. Believe me or don't. But if you find yourself in the deep woods and feel eyes watching you from the darkness, now you know what might be looking back.